raspberry spring at the beginning of August. The heat often becomes insupportable. At that season, from 12 to 3 o'clock, the most determined and ardent sportsman is not able to hunt, and the most devoted dog begins to clean his master's spurs. That is, to follow at his heels, his eyes painfully blinking and his tongue hanging out to an exaggerated length. And in response to his master's reproaches, he humbly wags his tail and shows his confusion in his face. But he does not run forward. I happened to be out hunting on exactly such a day. I had long been fighting against the temptation to lie down somewhere in the shade, at least for a moment. For a long time, my indefatigable dog went on running about in the bushes, though he clearly did not himself expect much good from his feverish activity. The stifling heat compelled me at last to begin to think of husbanding our energies and strength. I managed to reach the little river, which is already known to my indulgent readers, descended the steep bank, and walked along the damp yellow sand in the direction of the spring known to the whole neighborhood as Raspberry. The spring gushes out a cliff in the bank, which widens out by degrees into a small but deep creek, and 20 paces beyond it falls with merry babbling sound into the river. The short velvety grass is green about the source. The sun's rays scarcely ever reach its cold silvery water. I came as far as the spring. A cup of birchwood lay on the grass, left by a passing peasant for the public benefit. I quenched my thirst, laid down in the shade, and looked round. In the cave, which has been formed by the flowing of the stream into the river, and hence marked forever with a trace of ripples, 2 old men were sitting with their backs to meet. One, a rather stout and tall man in a neat dark green coat and lined cap, was fishing. The other was thin and little. He wore a patched fine coat and no cap. He held a little pot full of worms on his knees, and sometimes lifted his hand up to his grizzled little head, as though he wanted protected from the sun. I looked at him more attentively, and recognized in him Stushka of Shumihina. I must ask the reader's leave to present this man to him. A few miles from my place, there's a large village called Shumihina, with a stone church erected in the name of St. Cosmo and St. Damien. Facing this church, there had once stood a large and stately manor house surrounded by various outhouses, offices, workshops, stables, and coach houses, baths and temporary kitchens, wings for visitors, and for baths, conservatories, swings for people, and other more or less useful edifices. A family of rich landowners lived in this manor house, and all went well with them till suddenly one morning all this prosperity was burned to ashes. The owners removed to another home. The place was deserted. The blackened site of the immense house was transformed into a kitchen garden, covered up in parts by piles of bricks, the remains of the old foundations. A little hut had been hurriedly put together out of the beams that had escaped the fire. It was roofed with timber bought 10 years before for construction of a pavilion in the Gothic style, and the gardener Mitrofan with his wife Axnia and their 7 children was installed in it. Mitrofan received orders to send greens and garden stuff for the master's table 150 mi away. Axnia was put in charge of a Tyr cow, which had been bought for a high price in Moscow, but had not given a drop of milk since its acquisition. A crested smoke-colored drake, too, had been left in her hands. The solitary seigneurial bird for the children, in consideration of their tender age. No special duties had been provided, a fact, however, which had not hindered them from growing up utterly lazy. It happened to me on 2 occasions to stay the night at this gardener's, and when I passed by, I used to get cucumbers from him, which for some unknown reason were even in summer peculiar for their size, their poor watery flavor, and their thick yellow skin. It was there I first saw Stushka, except Mitrofan and his family, and the old deaf church warden, Gerasim, kept out of charity in the little room of the one-eyed soldiers' widows. Not one man among the SA serfs had remained at skim enough for Stushka, whom I intend to introduce to the reader, could not be classified under the special order of house serfs, and hardly under the genus man at all. Every man has some kind of position in society, and at least some ties of some sort. Every house serf receives, if not wages, at least some so-called ration. Stabushka had absolutely no means of subsistence of any kind, had no relationship to anyone. No one knew of his existence. This man had not even a past. There was no story told of him. He had probably never been enrolled on a census revision. There were vague rumors that he had once belonged to someone as a valet. But who he was, where he came from, who was his father, and how he had come to be one of the Shumihina people, in what way he had come by the fine coat he had worn from immemorial times, where he lived and what he lived on all these questions, no one had the least idea. And to tell the truth, no one took any interest in the subject. Grandfather Trafimic, who knew all the pedigrees of all the house serfs in a direct line to the fourth generation, had once indeed been known to say that he remembered that Stupska was related to a Turkish woman whom the late master, the Brigadier Alexei Roman, had been pleased to bring home from a campaign in the baggage wagon. Even on holidays, days of general money giving and of feasting on buckwheat dumplings and vodka after the old Russian fashion. Even on such days, Chapushka did not put an appearance at the trestle tables, nor at the barrels. He did not make his bow, nor kiss the master's hand, nor toss off to the master's health, and under the master's eye a glass filled by the fat hands of the baith. Some kind soul who passed by him might share an unfinished bit of dumpling with a poor beggar perhaps. At Easter, they said Christ is risen to him. But he did not pull up his greasy sleeve and bring out of the depth of his pocket a colored egg to offer it panting and blinking to his young masters or to the mistress herself. He lived in summer in a little shed behind the chicken house, and in winter in the ant-room of the bathhouse. In the bitter frost, he spent the night in the hoft. The house, serfs had grown used to seeing him. Sometimes they gave him a kick, but no one ever addressed or remarked to him. As for him, he seems never to have opened his lips from the time of his birth. After the configuration, this forsaken creature sought a refuge at the garden of Mitrophans. The gardener left him alone. He did not say, "Live with me," but he did not drive him away. And Stepushka did not leave at the gardener's. His abode was the garden. He moved and walked about quite noisy. He sneezed and coughed behind his hand, not without apprehension. He was forever busy and going stealthily to and fro like an ant, and all to get food, simply food to eat. And indeed, if he had not toiled from morning till night for his living, our poor friend would certainly have died of hunger. It's a sad lot not to know in the morning what you will find to eat before night. Sometimes the Pascha sits under the hedge and gnaws a radish or sucks a carrot, or shreds up some dirty cabbage stalks. Or he drags a bucket of water along for some object or other, groaning as he goes. Or he lights a fire under a small pot and throws in some little black scraps which he takes from out of the bosom of his coat. Or he's hammering in his little wooden den, driving in a nail, putting up a shelf for bread. And all this he does silently as though on the sly before you can look round. He's in hiding again. Sometimes he suddenly disappears for a couple of days, but of course, no one notices his absence. Then, lo and behold, he's there again, somewhere under the hedge, stealthily kindling a fire sticks under a kettle. He had a small face, yellowish eyes, hair coming down to his eyebrows, a sharp nose, large transparent ears like a bat, and a beard that looked as if it were a fortnight's growth, and never grew more nor less. This, then, was whom I met on the bank of the Easter in company with another old man. I went up to him, wished him good day, and sat down beside him. Chapushka's companion, too, I recognized as an acquaintance. He was a freed serf of Count Podolech's. One may also nickname Tumen, that is Fog. He lived with a consumptive Balhovsky man, who kept an inn where I had several times stayed. Young officials and other persons of leisure traveling on the Oral High Road, merchants buried in their striped rugs, have other things to do, may still see at no great distance from the large village of Troitska, and almost on the high road, an immense two-story wooden house, completely deserted with its roof falling in and its windows closely stuffed up. At midday in bright sunny weather, nothing can be imagined more melancholy than this ruin. Here there once lived Count Pedro Leite, a rich grande of the olden time, renowned for his hospitality. At one time the whole province used to meet at his house to dance and make merry to their hearts' content to the deafening sound of a home-trained orchestra and the popping of rockets and Roman candles. And doubtless more than one aged lady sighs as she drives by the deserted palace of Boy and recalls the old days and her vanished youth. The Count long continued to give balls and to walk about with the affable smile among the crowd of famed guests. But his property unluckily was not enough to last his whole life. When he was entirely ruined, he set off to Petersburg to try for a post for himself and died in a room at a hotel without having gained anything by his efforts. Tumman had been a steward of his and had received his freedom already in the Count's lifetime. He was a man at about 70 with a regular and pleasant face. He was almost continually smiling, as only men of the time of Catherine ever do smile. A smile at once stately and indulgent. In speaking, he slowly opened and closed his lips, winked genuinely with his eyes, and spoke slightly through his nose. He blew his nose and took snuff too in a leisurely fashion, as though he were doing something serious. "Well, Michal," I began, "have you caught any fish here? If you will deign to look in the basket. I have caught 2 perch and 5 roaches." Show them." Stop stretched out the basket to me. "How are you, stuck?" I asked him. Oh, not so badly, your honor," answered Stipan, stammering as though he had a heavy weight on his tongue. "And is Mutrofan well?" "Well, yes, your honor." The poor fellow turned away. "But there are not many bites," remarked the man. "It's so fearfully hot. The fish are all tired out under the bushes. They're asleep. Put on a worm. Chapka." Stepushka took out a worm, laid it on his open hand, struck it 2 or 3 times, put on the hook, spat on it, and gave it to Tumman. "Thanks, Stupka. And you, your honor," he continued, turning to me, "are pleased to be out hunting as you see? And is your dog there English or German?" The old man liked to show off on occasion, as though he would say, "I too have lived in the world. I don't know what breed it is, but it's a good dog." "Ah, and do you go out with the hounds, too?" "Yes, I have 2 leashes of hounds." Tumman smiled and shook his head. "That's just it. One man is devoted to dogs, and another doesn't want them for anything. According to my simple notions, I fancy dogs should be kept rather for appearance sake, and all should be in style, too. Horses, too, should be in style, and huntsmen in style, as they ought to be, and all. The late Count, God's grace be with him, was never much of a hunter, but he kept dogs, and twice a year he was pleased to go out with them. The huntsmen assembled in the courtyard in red caftans trimmed with gallant, and blew their horns. His Excellency would be pleased come out, and His Excellency's horse would be led up. His Excellency would mount, and the chief huntsman put his feet in the stirrups, take his hat off, and put the residential to offer them to His Excellency. His Excellency is pleased to clip his whip like this, and the huntsmen give a shout, and off they go out a gate away. A huntsman rides behind the Count and holds in a silken leash 2 of the master's favorite dogs and looks after them well you may fancy. And he too, this huntsman, sits up high on a Cossack saddle. Such a red-shaked fellow he was, and rolled his eyes like this, and then there were guests too. You may be sure on such occasions and entertainment and ceremonies observed. I got away the Asiatic. He interrupted himself, suddenly drawing his line. "They say the Count used to live pretty freely in his day?" I asked. The old man spat on the worm and lowered the lining again. He was the great gentleman, as is well known. At times the persons of the first rank, one may say, at Petersburg, used to visit him with colored ribbons on their breasts. They used to sit down at table and eat. Well, he knew how to entertain them. He called me sometimes. "Tom Man," says he, "I won't buy tomorrow some live sturgeon. See, there are some, do you hear? Yes, your Excellency, embroidered coats, wigs, canes, perfumes, or coal in the best sort boxes, huge pictures. He would order them all from Paris itself, when he gave a banquet, God Almighty Lord of my being. There were fireworks and carriages driving up. They even fired off the cannon. The orchestra alone consists of 40 men. He kept a German as conductor of the band, but the German gave himself dreadful airs. He wanted to eat at the same table as the masters, so His Excellency gave orders to get rid of him. My musician says he can do their work even without a conductor. Of course, He was master then they would fall to dancing and dance till morning, especially at the echoes as matador. There's one caught the old man drew a small perch out of the water. Here you ask, Jobka. The master was all a master should be, continued the old man, dropping his line in again, and he had a kind heart, too. He would give you a blow at times, and before you could look round, you had forgotten it already. There was only one thing. He kept mistresses. Those mistresses, God forgive them. They were the ruin of him, too. And yet, he took the most generally from a low station. You would fancy they would not want much. Not a bit. They must have everything of the most expensive in all Europe. One may say, why shouldn't he live as he likes? It's the master's business. But there was no need to ruin himself. There was one, especially Aquilina was her name. She's dead now. God rest her soul. The daughter of the watchman at Stoya, and such a vixen. She would slap the count's face sometimes. She simply bewitched him. My nephew she sent for a soldier. He spilled some chocolate on a new dress of hers. And he wasn't the only one she served. So, those were good times though, added the old man with a deep sigh. His head drooped forward and he was silent. Your master, I see, was severe then, I began after a brief silence. That was a fashion then, your honor, he replied, shaking his head. That sort of thing is not done now. I observe, not taking my eyes off him. He gave me a look askance. Now surely it's better, he muttered and let out his line further. We were sitting in the shade, but even in the shade it was stifling. The sultry atmosphere was faint and heavy. One lifted one's burning face uneasily, seeking a breath of wind, but there was no wind. The sun beat down from blue and darkening skies. Right opposite us on the other bank was a yellow field of oats, overgrown here and there with wormwood. Not one ear of the oats quivered. A little lower down, a peasant's horse stood in the river up to its knees and slowly shook its wet tail. From time to time, under an overhanging bush, a large fish shot up, bringing bubbles to the surface, and gently sank down to the bottom, leaving a slight ripple behind it. The grasshoppers chopped in the scorched grass. The quail's cries sounded languid and reluctant. Hawks sailed smoothly over the meadows, often resting in the same spot, rapidly fluttering their wings and opening their tails into a fan. We sat motionless, overpowered with the heat. Suddenly, there was a sound behind us in the creek. Someone came down to the spring. I looked round and saw a peasant of about 50 covered with dust in a smock and wearing bast slippers. He carried a wicker-work pier and a cloak on his shoulders. He went down to the spring, drank thirstily, and got up. Alas, cried the man, staring at him. Good health to you, friend, where's God sent you from? Good health to you, Mikasa village, said the peasant coming nearer to us. From a long way off. Where have you been? The man asked him. I have been to Moscow, to my master. What for? I went to ask him a favor. What about? To lessen my rent, or to let me work it out in labor, or to put me on another piece of land, or something. My son is dead, so I can't manage it now alone. Your son is dead. He is dead. My son, added the peasant, the repper lived in Moscow as a cabman. He paid, I must confess, rent for me. Then are you now paying rent? Yes, we pay rent. What did your master say? What did the master say? He drove me away, says he. How dare you come straight to me? There's a bay leaf for such things. You ought first, says he, to apply to the bay leaf. And where am I to put you another land? You first, says he, bring the debt you owe. He was angry altogether. What then? Did you come back? I came back. I wanted to find out if my son had not left any goods of his own, but I couldn't get a straight answer. I say to his employer, I am Philip's father. And he says, what do I know about that? And your son says he left nothing. He was even in debt to me. So I came away. The peasant related all this with a smile, as though he was speaking of someone else. But tears were starting into his small, screwed-up eyes. and his lips were quivering. "Well, are you going home then now? Where can I go?" "Of course, I'm going home. My wife, I suppose, is pretty well starved by now. You should then..." Chapushka said suddenly. He grew confused, was silent, and began to rummage in the worm pot. "And shall you go to the bay leaf?" continued the man, looking with some amazement, and Stupka, what should I go to him for? I'm in arrears as it is. My son was ill for a year before his death. He could not pay even his own rent. But it can't hurt me. They can get nothing from me. Yes, my friend, you can be as cunning as you please. I am cleaned out." The peasant began to laugh. "King Simon shall have to be clever," if last laughed again. "Oh, things are in a sad way, Brother Vlos." Tomon ejaculated deliberately. "Sad? No." Vlos's voice broke. "How hard it is," he went on, wiping his face with his sleeve. "Who is your master?" "I asked him." "Count Valerian Petrovich, the son of Petrolich, the son of Petrake," replied to man. "Kadri gave him Vlos's village in his lifetime." "Is he well?" "He is well, thank God," replied Vlas. "He has grown so red, and his face looks as though it were padded. You see, your honor," continued the man, turning to me, "it will be very well near Moscow, but it's a different matter to pay rent here. And what is the rent for you altogether?" 95 rubles moderate lost there, you see, and it's the least bit of land, and all theirs is the master's forest, and that they say they have sold," observed the peasant there. "Yusika, give me a worm, why are you asleep, babushka?" Started the peasant, sat down by us, we sank into silence again on the other bank. Someone was singing a song, but such a mournful one. Our poor at last grew deeply dejected. Half an hour later, we parted. End of Raspberry Spring.